I want to talk to you about what makes us social. And of course, the question is, are we born social? Or do we have to learn to be social? Now, I believe that we humans actually share with other animals many brain mechanisms that have been fashioned by evolution over millions of years. And we've kept all those goodies that have turned out to be really adaptive in the social world. We have to get on somehow with each other. And I want to give you a very quick tour through our social brain. And it's like having a tour in a house. So we will start with the basement, have a look at the foundations of our social nature. And then we go to the ground floor, which is really where a lot of social mechanisms are happening. And I want to introduce you to the main floor, the show-off floor, which is a bit interesting, maybe a bit different, maybe a bit specially human. And then even more specially human, a sort of top floor where controls are happening and where they sometimes don't actually work so well. So let's start with the basement. These are the ancient foundations for our social nature. And what is it about? It's about bonding. It's about recognizing other agents. And it's all alchemy. It's all to do with ancient chemistry. So, for example, just being a mammal means you have to be able to nurture. You have to be able to live in the company of others. And you have to, manage competition even as early as this stage. And the brain mechanisms here are very largely regulated by hormones. But then there's this other incredibly important ability we have, that is recognize other agents. First of all, we have very strangely, quickly built-in face recognition mechanisms. We have mechanisms that draw us to eye gaze and let us follow it. Very, very important when we learn from others, because where others are looking, there's probably something interesting for us to learn. We can recognize those that are similar to us and dissimilar to us. It's very important to know whether you see a predator or whether you see a prey. And then there is something very interesting, and that is specialized processing of biological movement, all built in the brain, coming with us for free. So when you see these dots, you probably can't really imagine what they are. But look at this, making them move, and you can see a human figure. And you can not just see that it's a figure walking, but even the direction it's walking. So again, we have these specialized mechanisms which are zooming in on details of movement characteristics that tell us that's a human. And I recommend that you look at this website, Biomotion Lab, and you can find all of these point-light figures that they're called, and you can do amazing things, like the figure could turn from a man into a woman, from a happy person into a sad person, all just done by motion characteristics. Let's move to the ground floor. As I've already said, this is where it's really happening, being together, being in a group. And we like it. We hate to be alone. We hate to be isolated. It's the worst form of punishment. We want to be with others because we learn from others. And we do what others do. That's our particular skill. And what are the mechanisms? Sometimes they're called mirroring, but they all have to do with imitating others, learning from others, or contagion, having similar feelings to people around us, whether we like it or not.
I need to hand that to you as well. It will help your contagion.
Thank you very much. So anyway, we like what others like because we share the emotions of others. Now, the main floor. This is really for showing off. This is really very, very special. And possibly, just possibly, in the line of evolution, very specially human. It's something that has to do with an ability to attribute intentions or mental states. Mental states are things like desires and wishes and beliefs to each other. It's such a strange idea of an ability that we had to make up a complete new word for this, and we call it mentalizing. That is, it's thinking of mental states in order to explain, predict behavior. It's weird. It's absolutely, no one had thought such a thing should be necessary to think about. And how did we find out about it? Why is it special? Is it really for showing off? And indeed, the opposite, deception. And yes, it's because of autism that we learned about this. Because in autism, this exact ability, this spontaneous ability to attribute intentions is compromised. And people with autism do not show off, and they do not deceive. So it is an interesting thing, and I want to give you all a quick test of mentalizing. So we are all compelled to attribute mental states. We are born that way, if you're not autistic, to creatures that move as if they were agents. And here goes. So here are some triangles moving together. What do you think is happening here? It's a little one, a big one, going out of the house. And perhaps, the little one doesn't want the big one to go out. It's saying, no, 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 no. The big one is pushing it a bit. Yes, please, come on, it's nice. And blocking the door, so he can't do anything. Now the little one is outside and perhaps likes it outside. So here they go, playing happily together. So it's a story that you can see in just these moving triangles. It's incredible how this actually happens and how most people I've ever shown this to come with that kind of story. Not if they're autistic. But here is another set of triangles, and they're just moving and bouncing off the edge sometimes, and it's very boring, and we do not think of a nice little story. They're just drifting and floating. Now, it's really interesting that we have that contrast between the sort of story-making, interacting triangles and these randomly moving triangles, because we can use the difference in order to see what happens in the brain. So, in order to see what is actually responsible in the brain for this mentalizing ability, we can just put people in a scanner and we can measure brain activity while they're watching these interacting triangles, making story, and take away the brain activity when people are watching the random triangles. Of course, the brain is active all over the place, but just that little difference over and above everything else, that is what we're interested in, and here it is. It's this particular region of the brain, and one in the front, that sort of is extra active when we are attributing mental states to each other in a very automatic and spontaneous way. Now, here is the picture, what happens with autism. This is from another study. It's nothing to do with these triangles. Here we have stories where you are asked questions which require you to mentalize, and then you have stories which require you not to mentalize, but just answer some simple cause and effect question. And what you can see immediately is that the neurotypical group, on average, has sort of rather cool colors. These are two different autistic groups, and you can see they're actually very similar in having much hotter colors. So the mentalizing system is the same in the autistic and in the neurotypical group, but here in this study it was abnormally active. And we have got other studies where it has been shown to be abnormally not active. So whatever it is, it's working in a different way. Now, what's mentalizing for? It is actually what we use all the time just to understand comedy, for example. We can just do it without this being an effortful thing for us. And we use mentalizing to persuade others and to manipulate them and indeed to deceive them. And we manage our reputation by continuously taking into account what others think of us. Now let's go to the control room, last bit of the house. right at the top floor. And what's happening is checking and monitoring and trying to control all these weird and sometimes conflicting mechanisms and making the best of it. And, well, not always succeeding, because we know social life is very complicated, so we have rules and regulations. The control room is where we have this another amazing human ability to be able to think about thinking. And this is a very critical and interesting ability, and it does sometimes enable us to regulate social interactions for the good, and of course sometimes not at all. But what we can do in human societies is setting up rules for good behavior, setting up guidelines and laws and things like that. It is the place of social learning. So here is where culture comes in and goes beyond what evolution has given us. So look at the social house from the outside. We have these foundations of biology, of nature. We share it with all other animals, certainly with all mammals. And then we have some sort of extra bits which are quite consciously human, and they allow us to have culture. And there is a huge interaction between culture and nature, so that culture can sometimes give signals to suppress, to stop, to do things with our otherwise very strange social urges and mechanisms, sometimes for the good, sometimes for the bad. So I want to say again, we are exquisitely social beings. My answer to my initial question is that evolution has built into the brain practically all our social capacities, but culture has shaped the social capacities and has changed the brain. That's it.